What's up, Taiwan? I'm Yvonne with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. U.S. President Joe Biden has requested a 1% increase in the country's defense budget, with $100 million dedicated to military financing for Taiwan. That money would be for military training and weapons systems specifically for Taiwan's defense. The proposed budget now sits at $895 billion, much less than the estimated $929 billion the U.S. would need to continue operating at current strength. Many are concerned that the budget is too low due to a 1% increase cap made by lawmakers in 2023, which officials say isn't enough to even offset inflation. This budget is not final and will be reviewed later this year. A group of U.S. companies are set to invest over $1 billion in the Philippines. U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo announced the plans on an official trip to the Philippine capital, Manila. She says the investment will target solar energy, electric vehicles, digitalization, and education. The U.S. has been deepening economic ties with the Philippines and plans to build a port in the country's northernmost island of Batanes, located 150 kilometers from the southern tip of Taiwan. A Taiwanese businessman is facing charges for importing Chinese chili powder tainted with toxic dye, just the latest in a growing food safety scandal in the country. John Van Trieste looks at how this case has affected the Taiwanese public.
Recalls, police searches, and possible charges. A scandal over tainted chili powder from China is cooking up trouble across the country. Kaohsiung prosecutors have released businessman Li Yanting on a $25,000 bond and stripped his companies of their license to handle food products. They say Li knowingly sold chili powder mixed with cancer-causing red dyes banned in Taiwan. But the scandal has stirred up far more than legal troubles. Public alarm reached the point where all chili pepper is suspect.
我有时候搞不好会把它丢掉了，然后我大概就觉得不会吃，尽量最近都不会吃，以后可能也不会吃吧。
就是会用那个生辣椒切来炒菜啊，或是配料还 OK， 化学的或那些工业的我就不再用了。
It's forcing restaurants that rely on spicy food to make choices. Some eateries hope certificates of safety will reassure diners, but others have been forced to take their best sellers off the menu.
麻辣锅，还有我们用卤酱去卤的那个鸭血，还有加辣的部分我们就停止。
Demand for domestic chili has tanked, with prices falling by about a third from where they were last year. Taiwan is a country where unease about food safety is frequently in the headlines. Memories of a 2013 to 2014 tainted cooking oil scandal are still fresh. And more recent controversies about U.S. pork containing leanness-enhancing additives and Japanese food products contaminated by the Fukushima nuclear disaster have left a bad taste in people's mouths. The newest scandal over chili powder and its effects on consumer behavior show that the public is still not willing to stomach concerns over food safety. Eason Chen and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
China's Communist Party is tightening its control on the country's cabinet through an amended law. The precise changes to the 4-decade-old State Council organic law have not yet been made public, but experts believe it will give the Communist Party more control over all main levels of government. The move will chip away at the State Council's power, as they will be expected to follow the teachings of Xi Jinping.
我们要在以习近平同志为核心的党中央 坚强领导下，坚持以习近平新时代中国特色社会主义思想为指导。
U.S. intelligence officials say the country is facing increasingly complex global threats. In their annual threat assessment report presented to Congress, they said the government is facing a more fragile world order. The report focused on threats by China and Russia, as well as the risk of border conflict stemming from the Israel-Hamas war. Officials say continued U.S. aid for Ukraine would send a message to Chinese President Xi Jinping about increased military aggression in the region.
Sustaining that support for Ukraine not only doesn't come at the expense of deterring China, it actually helps to deter China, whether it's in Taiwan or the South China Sea or other places.
Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim has defended his country's tie to the Palestinian militant group Hamas.
Our relations with Hamas is the political wing of Hamas. And I made no apologies about it. And that engagement has helped at least to bring about the concerns, including about hostages. We do not have any connection with any military outfit or wing.
Thank you.
Anwar is on a 6-day trip to Germany, his country's largest trading partner in the EU. His comments come less than a week after he criticized Western inaction against Israel's war in Gaza, compared with the response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Victims of state violence during Taiwan's martial law era are calling for the establishment of a memorial day. In the period known as the White Terror, hundreds of thousands were imprisoned, tortured, and killed for opposing the authoritarian government. Rick Lauer has more.
80-year-old Chen Lier used to teach in this junior high school, and being back reawakens painful memories. It was the 70s and Taiwan was under martial law. Chen was accused of making anti-nationalist comments in class. He was jailed for nearly 5 years. Now he's calling for a day to remember the victims of political oppression under Taiwan's period of authoritarian rule.
个体层面的事情，或许我们可以不必计较，事关社会集体的大事，却必须要诚恳地正视、认知、反省，不能遗忘。
The era of oppression, known here as White Terror, lasted 43 years from 1949. Taiwan's nationalist government, headed by dictator Chiang Kai-shek, targeted those they saw as opposing their rule, killing thousands of people and imprisoning more than 100,000.
But if people don't feel recognized and the stories are ignored and even starting to be forgotten, especially as the generation that lived those stories are passing, then I think then there's going to be still a lot of unresolved feelings of pain and hurt in that society.
Since democratization in the 1980s, Taiwan's leaders have made efforts to right the wrongs of the country's authoritarian past. In a process known as transitional justice, the current government has exonerated 6,000 political prisoners, redistributed ill-gotten gains, and given tens of millions of US dollars in compensation. Every year, on the 28th of February, Taiwan marks the uprising that prompted the installation of martial law, as a way to honour the historical turning point for the country's democracy. But some groups here say the victims of White Terror should be remembered separately, on the 19th of May, the day martial law was implemented, as a way to make sure future generations do not forget the struggles Taiwan's people went through for the country's freedom.
受迫害的这些前辈们，要给他们一个历史的交代，绝对不能让他们来白白牺牲。
Taiwan's president-elect said his new government will do more to atone for the White Terror bloodshed and endeavour to restore victims' honour. For those who bore the brunt of that state violence, having a distinct day to commemorate their suffering would help ensure that future generations here understand the cost of freedom. Klein Wong and Rick Lauert for TaiwanPlus.
Every year, people in Taiwan gather to plant trees for Arbor Day. As Laura Stewart reports, one group in Taoyuan is giving their saplings an extra boost with a special kind of fertilizer.
With a firm pat and a bit of love, this sapling gets a new home. It's one of nearly 25,000 trees being planted in Taoyuan for Arbor Day, a day to celebrate and support the country's trees. And this event in Taoyuan has a special focus.
除4节哈，除了种树、护树、植树之外呢，我们也希望回收树哈，来作为一个养树的一个活动。
The Taoyuan Smart Farming Group is using old plant waste like dead branches and fallen leaves to make fertilizers.
碎石机就是把这个树枝碎了以后，跟一些蛋材哈混在一起，让它过一段时间发酵，变成我们自然的有机的肥料。
It's a process aimed at encouraging farmers to recycle plant waste rather than burning old crops.
焚烧废弃物每1公吨会产生12.57的碳排放当量，所以其实当你没有燃烧的时候，它就可以节省大量的净化。
And besides cutting those carbon emissions, the fertilizer improves overall soil quality. The Smart Farming Group is looking to process 1,000 tons of agricultural waste per year into fertilizer to keep Taiwan's trees flourishing well into the future. Luffy Lee and Laurel Stewart for TaiwanPlus.
Plastic pollution in the ocean is a growing issue for much of the world. But the research center at Singapore's Nanyang Technological University is working on a potential solution from an unlikely source. Chris Gorin has the story.
Plastic trash, a problem across the globe, but especially acute in regions like Southeast Asia, filling rivers, coastlines, and landfills. But who can save the world from this tsunami of trash? Researchers in Singapore think this gargantuan problem could be resolved by the smallest of superheroes. Meet the Superworms. These plastic-eating beetle larvae not only have superpowered stomachs, but can be found almost anywhere.
We bought Superworm from a local pet store. The Superworm is very famous because they can eat and break down plastic.
The Superworms won't be used on trash directly. Instead, scientists are hoping to harness the bacteria in their gut to do the work on its own.
Once the worms are done feeding with plastics, so this is what it looks like, they create holes. We take out the microorganisms from their gut and we put them in flasks with fresh plastics so that eventually they start growing on them and degrading them.
Nowhere is the plastic problem more acute than in Asia. 80% of the ocean's plastic pollution comes from the region, and more than half of the world's plastics are produced here. But scientists hope that the bacteria can become a new natural tool in the trash-fighting toolbox.
To take care of our plastic waste crisis, we A, need to use less plastic, B, we need to shift to products that are more sustainable, like coffee cups that we can reuse multiple times, and C, we need to increase our recycling effort, and for that we can use the Superworm.
It's still uncertain if the bacteria can work at a scale large enough to make a dent in the trash crisis. That's why most experts still say that changing individual habits will be essential to reducing waste. So, for now at least, it seems humans won't be able to squirm their way out of this one. Chris Ma and Chris Gorin for TaiwanPlus.
For centuries, oyster farming has provided livelihoods for people living along Taiwan's southwestern coast. But faced with climate change and other obstacles, farmers are struggling to keep their farms afloat. Oyster reports.
这个很重啊，这个可以收成的。
Farmer Lei Mingde pulls up oysters he's been growing for over a year. Big specimens like these are harder to come by as harvests are less predictable under the effects of climate change. Once a thriving industry in southern Taiwan, oyster farms have been disappearing for decades, a reality made worse by a recent historic drought in the region.
它鹅就靠这个水流过去带它的养分嘛。那你如果淤积起来，它当然水流就 流不进去啊，流不进去就越来越不能成长啊，因为养分没有办法供应啊。
Lin's been using this suspended net method, letting oysters hang in the water, helping the meat inside grow plumper. It's a more expensive way of farming, but a necessary one, Lin says, to stay in business. In 2011, oyster farms made up a little over 28 square kilometers of the sea surface in southern coastal Tainan City. 10 years later, that number's dropped to under 20 square kilometers. It's a trend that's only going to continue as water conditions could get worse.
藉由这些潮汐，把一些那个带走的状况，可能相对的就会变得比较差，就逐步的就会变差，所以它环境就会逐步的走向，好像逐步的走向一滩死水嘛。
The South's famous seafood used to bring in tourists by the boatload. Good old days local farmers are not expecting to get back.
它的那个愿景，我觉得不会越来越好，因为很多人他们来，大部分都是因为鹅啊新鲜嘛，你市面上吃的鹅啊没办法像这样子啊。
For many of these fishing villages, oysters are part of their unique character and why some farmers are holding on despite the changing tides. Justin Wu and Joyce Zhen for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. Before we go, the All-African Games are officially underway in Ghana. Here are some of the highlights from the opening ceremony. I'm Yvonne Yang. Take care, and I'll see you next time.